Could you eat a flamingo tongue? What if I told you that was just the appetizer? In ancient Rome, the wealthy didn't just eat. They competed in a game of excess, where taste mattered less than the power each dish represented. But what would drive an emperor to serve lion meat? For emperors, senators, and the most influential nobles, food was a spectacle, power served on silver and gold platters. What you're about to discover has nothing to do with the grapes and wine from the movies. The truth about what the rich ate in ancient Rome is far more bizarre, luxurious, and disturbing than you can imagine. The most lavish Roman banquets began long before the first course was served. They began with a whisper, because in Rome's high society, the menu was a weapon of impact. And few things caused more commotion than the triumphant arrival of an exotic bird, freshly roasted, with its colorful feathers carefully preserved for dramatic effect. You read that right. Some birds were served whole, with feathers meticulously reattached after cooking, to visually dazzle the guests. A peacock with its tail fanned out, lying on a silver platter, surrounded by petals and fruit. It wasn't just food, it was art, it was power. But among all those birds, there was one delicacy that made the elite's eyes sparkle with desire and envy. Flamingo tongues. Yes, tongues. Small, delicate, slowly cooked in a mixture of thick honey and aromatic vinegar. It was the symbol of extreme luxury, because obtaining flamingos, and in enough quantity to extract only their tongues, required a fortune and an absurd logistical network. Only the truly wealthy dared flaunt such extravagance. And they didn't stop there. They often served a special ostrich. Its size allowed for a true spectacle. It was roasted whole, then stuffed with eggs, dried fruits, and meat from other birds, creating a real culinary monument. A banquet within the banquet. But if meat impressed with its spectacle, the flavors of the sea drew sighs and whispers from the most demanding guests. Among the luxurious platters, a small container would appear, carved from alabaster or bronze. Inside, a creamy substance with a salty, intense aroma. The sea urchin. Today, we might compare it to caviar. Back then, it was even rarer, even harder to obtain. Harvested from the waters of the Mediterranean, these spiny treasures required delicate transport and careful preservation. But for Roman nobles, that effort was part of the dish's charm. The harder it was to serve, the more worthy it was of being flaunted. Consumed raw, straight from the shell, or used as a secret ingredient in refined sauces and creamy soups, sea urchins were the finishing touch on a banquet meant to be remembered for decades. But in Rome, luxury was never static. It had to evolve, outdo itself, reinvent itself. And when rare birds and seafood stopped impressing, the Roman elite looked farther, much farther. The provinces of the empire, distant, mysterious, full of exotic creatures and unfamiliar flavors, became the pantry of the aristocratic banquet. And that's how a new obsession emerged at the most influential tables: African antelopes. These slender, swift, almost mythical animals were brought from the North African regions, crossing deserts and seas until they reached the gardens of Roman villas. Their meat, considered light and refined, was slowly roasted in dark wine, soaked in thick honey, and covered in a mixture of cinnamon, Indian pepper, and cumin, spices that traveled dangerous, far-reaching trade routes. A story of domination, wealth, and imperial reach. And if antelopes already made an impression, imagine now an even rarer food. A symbol of lands almost mythical in Roman eyes. Camel meat. Few dishes sparked as much curiosity and, for some, even discomfort. These animals, living symbols of the East and desert caravans, arrived in Rome as true relics. Their meat was strong, fibrous, with a peculiar flavor. For that reason, it required slow and careful preparation. Cooked for hours in red wine and thick olive oil, it was infused with herbs like sage, dill, and bay leaves to soften its taste and give the meat an almost buttery texture. But if the meat was rare, camel milk was nearly legendary. Extracted in small quantities, it was turned into delicate white cheeses with a consistency between yogurt and ricotta. Its flavor was more acidic than common milk, but considered refined, exotic, exclusive. Served in small portions, alongside pure honey or black truffles, it was a delicacy reserved only for the boldest and the wealthiest. But not everything came from distant lands. For the Roman elite, true sophistication also lay in what was grown with their own hands, or rather, with the hands of hundreds of slaves specialized in luxury horticulture. The horti privati, private gardens maintained in noble villas, were true laboratories of culinary exclusivity. Every fig, every date, every grape was the result of extreme care, of an agricultural engineering that sought not only the perfect flavor but also the precise moment to harvest and showcase it. Among vegetables, artichokes and asparagus held the throne. Cooked in olive oil from Hispania and seasoned with sauces made from fermented must, they were treated as delicacies. And there was a reason for that. Their cultivation required expertise, ideal climate, and meticulous control. 3 things only the wealthiest could maintain. But when a meal needed to reach its visual peak, when the host wanted to silence the entire room upon revealing the main course, there was no doubt. It was time to bring out the wild boar. But this wasn't just any wild boar. Inside, it was stuffed with dried fruits, pine nuts, chestnuts, and even small roasted birds, all carefully arranged as a theatrical surprise revealed with the first slice. Around the animal, fresh fruits, black grapes, split pomegranates, pear slices, not for the flavor combination, but for the visual spectacle. Every detail of the dish made the host's power unmistakable. And just when you thought the banquet had reached its peak, that nothing could get stranger, Rome took an even bolder step, blurring the lines between the grotesque and the grand. Because there was a type of meat that carried the weight of blood and spectacle. In ancient Rome, even death in the arena was recycled into extravagance. Lions, panthers, bears, tigers, and even elephants killed during gladiatorial games weren't simply discarded. Their meat was considered edible trophies, served at banquets for senators, generals, and special guests of the emperor. Of course, the taste was wild, strong, sometimes unpleasant. That's why these meats were covered in thick sauces made from wine, honey, garlic, and eastern spices like cardamom or cloves. The goal wasn't to please the palate, but to impress. But not all Roman excess came in the form of exotic meat or bloody spectacles. Some of the most powerful symbols of wealth were found in the simplest details, or at least in what seemed simple at first glance. Because even bread in ancient Rome could separate a noble from a commoner with a single bite. Most of the Roman population ate dark, hard bread made from impure flour mixed with cheap grains. But the elite ate clouds of refined wheat. White bread, soft, carefully fermented, with thin crusts and an interior light as air. It was served still warm, sometimes soaked in virgin olive oil or topped with aromatic herbs. Having white bread at the table meant more than having good taste. It meant access to the most expensive flour in the empire. Alongside it sat small cuts of aged cheeses, made from goats and sheep's milk from mountainous regions. The more aged the cheese, the stronger its aroma, and the more prized it was. They were served as appetizers or between main courses, accompanied by honey and dried fruits. And to accompany such a banquet, drinks were essential. Even before the feast began, guests were welcomed with a special drink, mulsum, Wine mixed with honey, gently warmed, sometimes scented with cinnamon or rose petals. It was sweet, comforting, and perfect to prepare the stomach and the spirit. But the sophistication didn't stop there. Between courses, high-class Romans would cleanse their hands and palates with warm water, infused with rose petals, mint leaves, and orange peel zest. But take note, the Roman elite didn't drink just any wine. They selected only the rarest, oldest, and most coveted vintages. Among them, one stood out as the true king of the goblet, Falernian. Produced on the slopes of Mount Massico, this wine was so potent that some claimed it could be set on fire. It was served only on special occasions, and it was tasted with ceremony. In the end, the banquets of the Roman elite were more than parties. They were performances of absolute power. Every rare ingredient, every extravagant dish, every sip of aged wine served as a silent reminder. Rome ruled the world. While the majority lived on the basics, the elite turned every meal into an affirmation of dominance, sophistication, and superiority. These banquets fed ego, prestige, and power. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these dishes would you be brave enough to try? And which one would you never let near your table? Leave your answer in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story and want more epic content like this, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. In the video on your screen, we'll reveal the reasons why Romans ate lying down.